Hi, my name is John Podlaski. I'm the author of When Can I Stop Running? The book itself is a Vietnam War story depicting two soldiers, young teenagers, who have to spend the night alone out in the jungle outside of the fire base as an early warning system, looking and listening for enemy soldiers. The book itself is interspersed with tales of my youth, things that scared me when I was young and where running was always a way of getting away. So I'd like to share part of a chapter with you. This is about a bunch of 14-year-olds who are gathered to go into the local cemetery to research and find out why a certain headstone would bleed during the night. They wanted to prove whether it was true or false, and this is how the story goes. Paul and I arrived on our bikes at the rendezvous point a little after 9:30 p.m. and found several of our friends waiting in the shadows along the fence line. 8 of us have planned to go on this reconnaissance mission, but all 4 girls backed out. They claimed that the boys were better suited to climb over fences, fight ghouls, and handle anything else that we might encounter. Ghouls? Hell, I never considered coming across evil spirits once inside. Now I was beginning to have second thoughts. The girls clearly used the female card to stay behind and had no intention of admitting they were just plain scared shitless. The guys, on the other hand, had an image to uphold and didn't want to appear as sissies in front of the girls. As a consolation, at least we would not have to put on a show of bravado with the girls not there, and we could just be ourselves doing the deed. It was time to go. Gloria and her friends offered words of encouragement and well wishes, promising to stay right there until we returned. It was George, Jimmy, Paul, and myself on this mission. Looking up at the towering fence before us, we could see that scaling it would clearly be the most challenging part of this adventure. At least we hoped that would be the worst part. The heavy wrought iron fence, designed to keep intruders out, stood menacingly before us. Each black 3/4-inch square steel baluster had a 6-inch long spear-shaped ornament top, its overall height just a foot shy of regulation basketball rim. Visions of impalement flashed through our brains, giving us pause and second thoughts of aborting the recon. However, boys being boys, we would have done anything to look macho in front of the females, even if it meant doing something exceptionally stupid that might get us critically injured. Upper and lower 3-inch wide rails ran horizontally along the expanse of the fence, 2 feet from both the top and bottom, providing stability and strength to the structure. It was designed to make it almost impossible to climb. After 15 minutes of brainstorming, as if us 14-year-olds were capable of doing so, Gloria returned carrying 2 folded wool blankets in her arms. Standing on the bottom rail, I was able to drape both of them over the top of the balusters, thereby giving us a cushion and some protection against the sharp tips. I volunteered to be the first over. As George was the largest and tallest of the group, we used him as a ladder to reach the upper rail. Jimmy and Paul helped me onto George's shoulders and then positioned themselves to catch me in case I fell. From there, I stepped onto the top rail, threw myself over the other side, and slid down the baluster like a firefighter on a pole. This accomplishment resulted in subdued cheers and clapping from those on the other side. It only took a few minutes before the other 3 joined me. It was time to set off and find this mysterious gravestone. The 4 of us walked side by side toward the interior, It reminded me of the scene in The Wizard of Oz where Dorothy and her companions walked through the deadly forest, but there was no yellow brick road to follow, no beacon to guide us through the darkness ahead. We proceeded onto the cool night cautiously, keeping within an arm's reach of the guy next to us, holding onto his shoulder as we crept along. The tall trees soon blocked the rising moon from shining through the canopy, and each step was more precarious than the last. The old ornate memorial statues would suddenly materialize in the darkness to give us a start. Angels poised in the air with shields and spears caused us to duck more than once. Still no sign of the bleeding stone. Hearing and not seeing the occasional vehicle passing on 6 Mile Road, we changed direction and began shuffling that way. Suddenly, Paul let out a muffled yelp and disappeared. We couldn't make out a thing around us and called out to him, groping about with our arms. The three of us started to panic and were about ready to take flight when we heard him cussing from the ground behind us. Shit, shit, shit. We found him sprawled out and helped him to his feet. Apparently, Paul stepped onto a grave marker that had sunk into the ground. The sudden downward step caused him to lose his balance and fall to the ground. He thought he might have sprained his ankle, and he continued to spit out dirt and grass in between words. His open mouth had crashed into the damp earth, and his face hit the ground. I thought back to that first summer at camp when one of the boys in our group was grabbed by a mischievous counselor in the middle of the night while on his way to the bathroom. He screamed bloody murder, and the rest of us took off in a flash, scared beyond belief and leaving him alone to fend for himself. Luckily, Paul never found out how close I was to repeating history. We only had another half hour left before the apparition was said to disappear. We walked out from the copse of trees and surrounded us and found ourselves stepping into the light of now risen full moon. The ability to see changed our mood somewhat, but didn't help to eliminate the eeriness of the graveyard. We walked among the dead, intruding on hallowed ground, our fear of the unknown growing with every second. Just then George spotted a single vertical gravestone in the near distance and wordlessly pointed it out to us. A strange red pulsing glow emanated from it, a single entity standing alone, not sharing the warmth with its neighbors. Dropping to our knees, we continued watching in silence, hoping for some sort of sign that would unlock the baffling mystery before us. None of us dared to venture any closer, afraid that some alien or paranormal force might be residing there. Paranoia took over. We continuously looked around, especially behind us, to ensure that nothing was sneaking up on us. We kept watching, but the stone's appearance remained unchanged. Was it bleeding? Was there a puddle of blood at the base of the stone? Imaginations began to soar and told us that it was far worse than anything we imagined. We pleaded with each other and agreed to leave. Suddenly, the headstone stopped bleeding. The four of us looked at one another in amazement. John looked at his glow-in-the-dark watch, a token from his Boy Scout days, and sure enough, it was midnight. Was it safe for us to check out the grave now? Nobody wanted to find out. Nobody cared. It was time to head back to the others. Hyped up and anxious to get back to our friends, we retraced our steps, still debating the details of the mystery. We were halfway through the dark stand of trees when a bright beam of light suddenly pointed directly at us. We froze, our feet rooted to the ground. A deep, guttural voice called out, summoning us to come to him. Not venturing to even sneak a peek behind us, we almost tripped over each other, attempting to get away. Running as if our lives depended on it, we continued in the direction of the fence line and our waiting friends. A bobbing beam of light behind us indicated that whatever it was still chasing us. Our minds were only able to focus on one thing: escaping this evil place. Once we were close enough, we screamed out to our friends, warning them to run. They took off without questioning or a moment's hesitation. No teamwork existed this time when it came to scaling the fence. Every man for themselves. Pure fear drove us, and surges of adrenaline helped us leap onto the upper rail and cross over without any help. George was the first to get over, and once his feet hit the ground, he launched himself after the girls. I was next, and Jimmy followed a second or two later, both of us running after the retreating group. Paul was last to mount the fence and took a moment to dislodge the blankets from the top of the spears, tossing them to the ground. Unbeknownst to him, one of the top fence spears snagged his pant leg as he leaped over, causing his body to slam into the other side of the fence. Paul hung precariously for a second before the spear ripped through his pants, tearing the material from his thigh to his ankle. He fell to the ground in a heap, knocking the wind out of himself for the second time in less than an hour. Not seeing any evidence of the pursuer in his beam of light, Paul laid there panting, taking a moment to catch his breath. Meanwhile, the seven of us huddled on Gloria's porch. George, Jimmy, and I, extremely animated in our descriptions, relayed all that we saw or imagined. The girls watched us, eyes wide, mouths agape, listening intently and thankfully that they didn't go with us. We wondered aloud about Paul, hoping that he didn't get caught or something worse. Sure, we were worried about him, but none of us could summon the courage to go back to look for him. A slow-moving shadow on the street caught our eye. We all held our breath and watched without speaking. Suddenly, the shadow walked into the glow of an overhead streetlight 2 houses down. A second later, Paul materialized out of the dark. He was disheveled, bent over, limping badly, the full length of his right pant leg ripped and blotched with blood, and he wasn't smiling. None of us laughed. We sat perfectly still, most of us wondering if a ghost had captured him, or if he had somehow become possessed. Paul shuffled toward the porch and tossed both blankets to Gloria. Not knowing what to expect, we remained poised and ready to run if Paul snarled at us. He finally spoke and said sharply, "Thanks for all your help back there. You guys left me to the wolves." None of us could respond. Shit, he's a werewolf now, I thought, inching my way off the cement slab. "Are you okay?" his girlfriend asked. Paul finally dropped onto the ground, drawing his knees up and wrapping them in both arms. "I'll be okay, just a bit of bad luck." We gathered around, hanging onto every word, listening to Paul intently as his woeful tale unfolded. Grateful that he wasn't caught, bitten, or possessed, we began to relax in his presence. Although we all felt really bad about what had happened to him, and felt guilty about leaving him in the lurch, we couldn't help but feel relieved that we had survived our night of terror. It was fear that made our self-preservation instincts kick in. Once again, running was our first and best response to that fear. That concludes the chapter. Look up the book. I know it's backwards, but you'll enjoy it. Thank you.